Some moments feel like dreams, too perfect, too beautiful to ever imagine they could break you. The night was so harmonious, and the sound of laughter blended with the evening's soft music. But Sophia barely noticed any of it. All she could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. It was fast and pounding with something more than excitement, something closer to anticipation and fear. Tonight, Darius plans to propose to Sophia, and he said,
Sophia, you've been my rock, my support, my sunshine. I can't imagine my life without you.
He paused, and Sophia's breath hitched. The sounds of the restaurant faded. The clink of glasses, the soft murmur of laughter, all of it disappeared as Darius reached into his jacket pocket. The world slowed. He asked Sophia,
Sophia, will you marry me?
The velvet box opened with a quiet snap, and the diamond inside caught the light, throwing tiny rainbows across the table. Gasps rose from nearby diners, but Sophia only saw him, only felt the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest, a mix of joy and disbelief so strong it made her dizzy. Her hand flew to her lips, trembling. Tears welled in her eyes, and she said,
Yes, I will marry you.
The applause of strangers rippled around them as Darius slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into a kiss. The city sparkled behind them, and for a brief, perfect moment, Sophia felt like the happiest woman in the world. The glow of the engagement lingered for weeks. Sophia floated through wedding preparations like a woman living in a dream. Her heart was full, and her future stretched out before her, bright and beautiful, and finally within reach. But not every smile was genuine. Not every friend celebrated with sincerity. Olivia watched from the sidelines, her red dress bold and striking, like a warning Sophia didn't yet recognize. Olivia had been her friend for years, or at least Sophia thought so. But there was something in her eyes, a sharpness disguised as sweetness, and when the cracks started to form, it was Olivia who pressed her fingers into them. The next day, Olivia visited Sophia. The afternoon sun poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Sophia's modern apartment. The room was warm and elegant, a reflection of her taste, neutral tones, soft textures, and the quiet kind of beauty that doesn't need to boast. Sophia twirled in front of the mirror, her wedding dress flowing around her like a cloud. Her face glowed with happiness, her eyes shining. So Olivia's voice cut through the joy, and she said,
Sophia, do you really think Darius is ready for this?
Sophia paused, the smile slipping from her face.
Olivia, what do you mean?
Oh, nothing. It's just that I saw him with someone the other night. I didn't want to say anything, but, I thought you should know.
Sophia's eyes widened. The room grew colder. The golden afternoon light suddenly felt harsh. Sophia's heartbeat quickened. The first crack appeared. She was heartbroken. So the next morning, Sophia quickly went to Darius's office. She stood near the door, her coat still on, her body poised as if ready to flee. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall, and her voice was steady. And she said,
Darius, tell me the truth. Are you seeing another woman?
Darius's jaw tightened. He loosened his tie, frustration flashing across his face.
What do you mean? You're being ridiculous. Don't you trust me? Maybe that's the real problem.
The room fell silent, and in that silence, the damage was done. The weight of his words crushed her, and the ring on her finger suddenly felt heavy and cold.
So it's true, isn't it?
Darius didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence said everything. The world felt too quiet, too empty. Sophia returned home and sat alone on the cold tiles of her pristine bathroom floor. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs, and her fingers twisted the engagement ring on her hand, as if trying to make sense of the weight it once carried. With a sharp, broken breath, she yanked it off. The ring fell from her fingers and landed with a hollow clink against the tiles. She was alone, and for the first time, she realized just how broken she had become. She stayed indoors and refused to talk to anyone. Her silence became a wall against the world. Days turned into nights, each one a lonely echo of the last. Her isolation became a prison, and in her solitude, depression began to creep in. One morning, as the sun poured softly through the lace curtains of her parents' home, the house smelled of fresh bread and cinnamon tea, comforting scents from childhood. But no amount of warmth could fill the cold ache in Sophia's chest. She sat curled up on the couch, knees drawn to her chest, her face pale and exhausted. The glow that had surrounded her in recent weeks was gone, replaced by a quiet emptiness. Her eyes were red and swollen, her hands wrapped tightly around a blanket, as if trying to hold herself together. Beside her was her mother, Mrs. Bella. She sat with calm grace, her soft brown face lined with gentle wisdom. She wore a colorful Ankara wrapper and a simple white blouse. The quiet strength in her presence was the only thing keeping Sophia from falling apart completely. And she told her that,
"My daughter, sometimes God removes people from our lives to protect us."
But why? Why does it hurt so much?
Sophia's throat tightened, the ache in her chest swelled, her mother's eyes softened, her voice filled with quiet conviction. And she responded,
"Because healing always hurts first, but God's word says He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Let Him bind your wounds, Sophia. You don't have to carry this pain alone."
The words broke something inside her. Tears fell freely as Sophia turned, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. The days passed slowly, carrying Sophia further from the heartbreak, but closer to something that felt like peace, or at least the beginning of it. The warm comfort of her parents' home wrapped around her like a blanket, and the steady presence of her mother was a balm to her wounded heart. One afternoon, Sophia was still in her room. The door burst open with the energy of a child's voice. Kamsi, Sophia's 8-year-old niece, charged into the room, her colorful braids bouncing behind her. She had a bright, mischievous smile and a spirit that filled every corner of the house. Without hesitation, she climbed onto the bed and sat beside Sophia. And she said,
"Auntie Sophia, you've been sleeping for so long."
Hello, Kamsi. I'm awake now, I promise.
Mommy said you were sad. Are you still sad?
A little, my dear. But I'm getting better. God is helping me.
Kamsi nodded thoughtfully, her expression wise beyond her years. For the first time in what felt like weeks, Sophia smiled, a real soft smile that reached her eyes. Kamsi pulled back, studying her face with a seriousness only children could understand.
That is good. Because I prayed for you. And you know what the Bible says, weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning.
Thank you, my little prophetess.
And in that moment, a small piece of Sophia's heart began to heal. The next day, Sophia went to the church. The church was nearly empty. The air was still and warm, carrying the soft echoes of a distant hymn. Sophia knelt at the altar, her forehead resting against clasped hands. Her voice was soft as she prayed.
Dear Father, I don't know how to let go, but I want to. Please, help me heal.
Tears slipped down her face, falling onto the wood of the pew. And as the silence stretched, a strange warmth spread through her, soft and steady, a promise that she wasn't alone. Later that day, as the choir's harmonies rose during the service, the pastor's voice broke through.
Sometimes God closes a door because what's behind it will destroy you. Don't cry over what He's saving you from. Healing doesn't come by holding on. It comes by letting go, by trusting that God's plan is better than your pain.
Sophia sat uncomfortably in her seat. The words struck her like lightning. Her breath caught and her chest tightened. Tears blurred Sophia's vision as the words cut deep, but this time they felt a little lighter. Sometimes healing isn't just quiet reflection. Sometimes it's found in movement, in the push and pull of muscles and breath, in the simple act of showing up for yourself. As she continued on her journey of emotional healing, she went to the gym to do some exercise for a couple of weeks. She also read inspiring books to help her forget the past. She stopped complaining. She stopped explaining to her friends. In fact, she focused on improving her self-worth and thinking of how she can bring value to her future partner. After a few months, Sophia began to consider dating again. The sting of loss had dulled, replaced by a quiet longing for companionship. She decided to start small, venturing out to a local restaurant known for its cozy atmosphere and live music. As she sat at a table by the window, watching the passers-by and sipping on a glass of wine, Sophia couldn't help but feel a mix of nervousness and excitement. It had been so long since she had put herself out there, and the thought of meeting someone new was both exhilarating and intimidating. Across from her was Harrison, warm-eyed, soft-spoken, and kind. So Harrison approached Sophia and introduced himself. He said,
"Hello, how are you? I am Harrison."
Hi, I am Sophia.
So they started talking. As the conversation got deeper, Harrison said,
"I've been afraid of love since my last relationship, but I realized healing takes time, and sometimes we have to let God do His work before we move forward."
Sophia's breath caught. His words mirrored her own thoughts so perfectly it felt like fate, and she replied softly,
Well, Harrison, I know exactly what you mean.
Their eyes met, and for the first time in a long time, hope flickered. Although Sophia's wound had not completely healed, and she did not make any tangible progress with Harrison. The next day, Sophia resumed work. The office hummed with quiet efficiency. Sophia typed away at her computer when Tyler, a colleague with too much curiosity and too little tact, appeared at her desk.
"Hi, Sophia. So you're now seeing someone, aren't you?"
Sophia's fingers paused on the keys. She replied,
That's none of your business, Tyler.
"Be careful, Sophia. Not everyone is who they seem."
He leaned in, lowering his voice. The words sat heavy in her chest long after he walked away. A few days later, Sophia and Harrison met again. They sat on a wooden bench, their laughter drifting over the sound of gentle waves. Harrison said,
"Sophia, I haven't laughed like this in years."
Sophia's heart warmed at the sound of his voice. Their hands brushed softly, and the world felt still. Harrison adjusted his white shirt, his phone placed neatly beside his plate. His smile was practiced and polite. He repositioned and looked at Sophia, saying,
"Sophia, you're exactly the kind of woman I've been praying for. Beautiful, accomplished, and God-fearing."
He ticked off each quality like a checklist. Sophia raised an eyebrow and replied,
That's kind of you to say.
"Don't worry, Sophia. Love grows with time, but I would also like us to get to know each other more and make love before we get married."
Excuse me, Harrison. What do you mean? I thought you were a Christian. I'm disappointed in you. In fact, I have to take my leave now.
Sophia left angrily and returned home. Then she went to join her mother in the kitchen cooking. The warm scent of spices filled Mrs. Bella's kitchen. Sophia stood by the counter, her sleeves rolled up as she helped chop vegetables. Her mum moved calmly around the kitchen, her colorful wrapper swishing with every step. Sophia said,
Mom? I met Harrison today, but things did not go down well. He is just perfect on paper, but There's no spark, no kindness, just plans and ambition.
Her mother gave her a knowing look and said,
My daughter, marriage is not just about paper qualifications. It's about the heart. And only God can show you who has the right heart for you.
But what if I never find it?
Just trust God's timing, not yours.
Mrs. Bella smiled, placing a gentle hand on her daughter's shoulder. As the year drew to a close, during the Christmas season, a young man named James made a visit to Sophia and her parents. He exuded charm and charisma, leaving an almost irresistible impression. Sophia, however, barely knew him. James explained that he lived nearby and had been observing her for some time, which had prompted his decision to decide to marry Sophia. Both Sophia and her parents were surprised, although they welcomed James warmly. However, they assured him that they would discuss his proposal with their daughter. Deep down in Sophia's heart, she was confused. That night, her room was quiet, the soft hum of crickets drifting through Sophia's open window. She knelt beside her bed. She opened her Bible and read Proverbs 3:5-6. Then she prayed.
Lord, I am tired. I am scared. Show me. Please show me who's right for me. Heal me so I don't push the right one away.
Tears slipped down her face as the room filled with silence. Just before dawn, a soft wind stirred the curtains in Sophia's room. The faintest light began to creep across the sky. A voice, gentle and powerful, filled the stillness.
Fear not, for I am with you. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. I will help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand.
Sophia's eyes snapped open. The room was quiet, but her heart pounded.
Lord, was that you?
She glanced down. Her Bible lay open to Isaiah, chapter 41, verse 10. Tears filled her eyes as she fell to her knees in the morning. At the family garden, the sun warmed Sophia's face as she sat on a wooden chair, smiling. Kamsi ran through the grass, chasing butterflies.
Auntie Sophia, why are you smiling so much today?
Because God spoke to me last night, and I finally feel at peace.
Oh really? I told you he would.
Few minutes later, her phone rang. The voice on the other end was one she hadn't heard in a long time. Smooth, familiar, and laced with something she couldn't quite place.
Hello, Sophia. I didn't know if I should call, but you needed to know.
Sophia's heart skipped a beat. The sound of Olivia's voice always carried a mix of memories, good and bad, and the unexpectedness of it set her on edge.
Olivia, what's going on?
It's Darius, your ex. He was in an accident. A car crash. He didn't make it.
What?
I thought you should hear it from me. I know things ended badly between you two, but I also know you cared about him.
Thank you for telling me.
There was a pause, a heavy, weighted silence. Sophia's breath caught, and for a moment all she could hear was the rush of blood in her ears. The room around her dimmed, the golden light suddenly cold and distant. Memories she thought she'd buried rushed back. The laughter on their first date, the way his hand fit in hers, the pain of his betrayal, the coldness in his silence. She hadn't thought about him in a long time. Not like this. But now the weight of the news pressed down on her, stirring a complicated storm of grief, regret, and sadness. After Sunday service, the church courtyard was filled with chatter and the sound of children playing. Sophia and her longtime friend David were discussing. They walked side by side, their conversation easy and light. But then Olivia appeared again, and her smile was dangerous.
Hi, David. It's been a while. It's such a small world. You never told Sophia, did you?
Tell me what? David, are you hiding something from me?
David's face fell. Sophia's heart began to pound, and she rushed to her car. The air in her car was thick with silence. David's voice, when it finally came, was soft, filled with regret. He said,
"Well, Sophia, Olivia is my cousin, and I knew about you before we met. I didn't plan this, but..."
But what? David? You lied to me?
Sophia returned home, closed her door, and sat on her bed, her phone vibrating with David's unanswered calls. The ache in her chest was familiar, and she hated it. So her mother came and stood in front of her door, her voice gentle but firm. She said,
Sophia, my daughter, don't let fear steal what God is trying to bless you with. Forgiveness is part of healing.
The next day, the dim glow of the church prayer room cast long shadows as Sophia walked in and found David waiting. His face was filled with hope and remorse. Sophia told him,
If we're going to do this, we need to put God first.
He nodded. The Bible study group buzzed with laughter and the rustle of turning pages. Sophia and David sat side by side, their eyes bright and joyful. Healing was no longer a distant hope. It was happening. The next day, David had another plan, which Sophia did not know about. The garden glowed with fairy lights as the sun dipped below the horizon. Family and friends gathered, their laughter filling the air. Sophia stood at the edge of the celebration, watching the people she loved. And then, David approached Sophia and said softly,
"Hey, Sophia, how are you? So, there's something important I want to tell you. It's both a good and bad news. The bad news is my company is sending me abroad very soon for a training, and we may not see each other again for a few months. But the good news is, with God's blessing, will you marry me?"
Tears filled Sophia's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy, and she replied happily,
Yes, I will marry you.
Few weeks later, David and Sophia walked down the aisle in a radiant wedding dress, her heart bursting with both gratitude and love. David kissed her forehead, and Sophia grinned and said,
You know what I've realized, honey? Healing first was the best decision I ever made.
And love was worth the wait.
Sometimes God breaks your heart to save your soul, and when the healing comes, the love you find is more beautiful than you ever imagined. At the end of the aisle stood Cynthia, David's ex, the woman who has some evil plans to destroy Sophia's marriage and happiness. But will she let her succeed? Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, share it with your loved ones. Also, leave your thoughts in the comments section.
Hello, it's Sophia. Please remember to subscribe and follow us on Heartlink Life. Thank you.